Welcome to the Touchdown Alabama Magazine Show. This is week 3. I'm TJ Paysinger. This is Jonathan McMath. The Crimson Tide coming off a huge victory against the number 18 Penn State Nittany Lions. Jonathan here was on the sidelines for that game, and can you talk to us a little bit about the atmosphere and what that was like?
Yeah, the atmosphere was absolutely electric. 101,000 rabid Alabama fans there to take on the Penn State Nittany Lions, and boy did they show up in full force. The stadium was absolutely packed, and so was the quad. I imagine there was probably close to 150,000 Alabama fans in Tuscaloosa this past Saturday, raring and ready to go. It was an absolutely great atmosphere, and I don't see how, if you're a recruit at that game, you don't attend the University of Alabama next fall.
Yeah, it was a great atmosphere for me as well. I was on the quad where you mentioned, and it was a great atmosphere. Lots of our friends hanging around, watch the game on TV. It was a great experience, and I was just glad to be in town for an event like this. But now let's get down to business. The Crimson Tide defeated the Penn State Nittany Lions fairly easily, 24-3. A lot of people say that the score doesn't really indicate how the game went. What did you see specifically from the offense?
I'll tell you what, the offense looked outstanding. They made a couple of mental mistakes in the red zone. I'm sure Coach Nick Saban will want to get those corrected in time for the Duke week, which we'll talk about momentarily. But Greg McElroy, another efficient game, 16 for 24, threw for over 200 yards. Trent Richardson absolutely carried this team, over 140 yards on the ground. Julio Jones had a big game. Marquise May stepped up. He made a nice play. Kevin Norwood got his first career reception, which just so happened to be a touchdown reception. The offense played a good game all in all. The offensive line, on the other hand, although they paved the way for Trent Richardson and company, they did have their first holding call in over 11 games. But going back to Trent real quick, he had over 100 yards, and that was the first player to rush for over 100 yards in 17 games against that Penn State defense.
Yeah, that's amazing. Alabama has a similar streak on their defensive front. Can you talk about the defense and how they fared?
Yeah, Alabama defense, they did a nice job stopping Evan Royster. Only allowed, I think, 30 or 35 yards for the big tailback from Penn State. Robert Bolden, the true freshman quarterback, certainly faced a daunting task going up against that defense. But you got to keep in mind Alabama's defense, relatively young themselves, and they had a couple of glaring mistakes. If Penn State was able to make some crucial catches, or Bolden could have completed some passes, this game actually could have been a little bit closer, in my opinion. But all in all, I think the defense looked good. Still some things they have to improve upon this week in order to get ready to play in that SEC schedule.
Absolutely. Anytime you give up 3 points to a team, that's great, no matter who you're playing. A little side note I'd like to make. Last week on the show, I predicted Evan Royster would get less than 50 yards. And what did he get? 32. Anyways, without gloating too much, special teams wasn't really electric. Nothing special really happened. Punt coverage, kickoff coverage was solid on both ends. Kay Foster missed a 40-yard field goal, which is going to happen with a freshman kicker. So there's nothing really to update as far as special teams are concerned. But they played solid, which is good down the stretch. And speaking of special teams, former special teams coach Ron Middleton, now the special teams coach for David Cutcliffe at Duke, who coincidentally the Crimson Tide is playing this Saturday at 2:30. Jonathan, what are your early kind of, expectations for how this game will go?
Well, I think Alabama's going to win the game, and I'll get into that more in the prediction segment, but I think Alabama's going to have an excellent opportunity here to get off to a good start. Their first true road test. I think it's good that it's at a stadium like Duke. It only holds 33,000 fans, but that secondary, a lot of those players out there, they haven't started. And this will really get them ready for SEC play. I think Alabama will be able to take advantage of that Duke defense, which gave up 54 points last week to Wake Forest. And then on the other hand, Alabama's defense, they still do have the work cut out for them. Sean Renfrey threw for over 350 yards there. Two wide receivers, Austin Kelly and Connor Vernon, had over 250 all-purpose yards, and the running back, Desmond Scott, had 122 yards rushing the ball. So going to be an interesting challenge here for that Alabama defense.
Yeah, Duke, like you said, they scored 48 points against Wake Forest. That's great against a pretty stout Wake Forest defense. Sorry. My key matchup for this week is David Cutcliffe and the offensive prowess of him against Kirby Smart and his defensive schemes.
Pretty good.
Should be a good one. I think that Kirby Smart probably has a one-up on David Cutcliffe in this area. I think he's kind of got that Nick Saban mindset, and I think that the defense will stop Coach Cutcliffe's offense, but it's still going to be kind of an interesting matchup to see. And who are some of your kind of key players from this game?
I think my key players is going to be the two that hadn't played yet. That's Mark Ingram and it's Marcel Darius. Alabama hasn't recorded a sack all year. They need that key pass rusher back in Darius. He's ready to go, and this would be a prime opportunity for him to get game ready before we go into that Arkansas game week. And then you've got Mark Ingram. He's been recovering from arthroscopic knee surgery. When you put him alongside Trent Richardson, you split carries. I can't think of a better duo, speaking of running backs, in the country, and I think that's my two key players for the week.
Both those guys are just hungry to get after it. Darius, it's hard for him to sit there and watch other quarterbacks just have time to throw in the pocket. His presence on that football field is going to make a huge difference the rest of this season, as well as Mark's and his ability to kind of share the load with Trent Richardson, possibly the two best backs in college football. It's going to be very fun for the rest of the year with those two guys back. And speaking of the Duke game and our kind of expectations, we'd like to get into our predictions segment now, which is my favorite part. Texas at Texas Tech. 2 years ago in Texas Tech, there was a legendary game there, Graham Harrell and Michael Crabtree. We all remember that one. But this year, it's a new quarterback, Garrett Gilbert, in his first year, his first road game. This should be very interesting. Do you see any kind of legendary makings in this game?
No, not at all. Garrett Gilbert's a really good quarterback. I think we saw flashes of that last year against that Alabama secondary in the BCS national title game. But I think Texas is too much. You've got Tommy Tuberville there for Texas Tech. And I just don't see Texas Tech being able to score as many points as Texas will this Saturday. Maybe they'll keep it close for a half, but I think in the end, Texas is going to win that game probably by 2 or 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, road contest isn't going to matter much. Texas Tech goes down. Next, we have the number 8 Nebraska Cornhuskers at Washington. Jake Locker is potentially a number 1 draft pick in April of next season. What do you think the Cornhuskers are going to do up there in Seattle?
I'll tell you what, I think Nebraska's going to come out. I think they're going to win that game. And I think if it wasn't for Jake Locker, Washington wouldn't even have a chance. I think he's the one player on any team in America that can keep their football team in the ballgame. But I think Bo Pelini and that defense of Nebraska is just going to be too much, and they're going to win that ballgame.
Absolutely, I agree. Not much to say there. Next, we have Mississippi State Bulldogs against the LSU Tigers. Mississippi State coming off a rather disappointing loss to the Auburn Tigers in a game that I predicted Mississippi State to win. They let me down. But
and I'll just say that I did predict Auburn to win that game.
He did, but you know what? You win some, you lose some. In Baton Rouge is where this game takes place. Where do you think it's headed?
Well, I may lose this prediction, but I'm going to say upset alert here in Baton Rouge. I'm going to pick Mississippi State over LSU. And I think anybody that's watched these two teams play can't disagree in the fact that Mississippi State has actually looked better. They play with more heart than the LSU and the LSU Tigers. I think Chris Ralph is going to have a big game, and I think that Mississippi State defense, along with that Dan Mullen offense, is going to go in there, surprise the Mad Hatter. And I think Mississippi State's going to come out of there with a close one in the fourth quarter.
If Les Miles screws this one up, you can guarantee he will be on the hot seat if he isn't already. However, I see LSU taking this one in a relatively close game at the end. This is a good one. Arkansas at Georgia in Athens. This is going to be quite a shootout, I think. I don't really know what I think about it yet. I'll let you predict first.
That sounds good. Last year, speaking of shootout, both these teams scored over 40 points, went back and forth, back and forth. I think Georgia actually pulled that game out at the end. I think this year, Ryan Mallett, that Arkansas team is going to be too much. I'm going to pick them to win. I'm buying into the hype here early on in the season for the Arkansas Razorbacks. Georgia didn't impress me last week against South Carolina. It's looked like Mark Richt is losing control of this team. So I'm going to go with Bobby Petrino and that high-flying offense and pick Arkansas to beat the Georgia Bulldogs in Athens.
Sounds like a safe pick, but he's wrong. Georgia's going to win in Athens. I just have this feeling. Close, very close game. It's going to be another shootout. Ryan Mallett and Aaron Murray, two of the becoming the premier quarterbacks in the SEC, even though Aaron Murray's only a freshman. I just say Georgia. Maybe this is just kind of wishful thinking, but I think Georgia somehow finds a way to win the game, unlike they did last week. Florida at Tennessee. Last year, everybody predicted Florida to just trounce the Vols in Gainesville, and they only beat them by a score of 23-13, I think it was, in what some claim to be a victory for Lane Kiffin, only losing by 10. But no Lane Kiffin this year. It's Derek Dooley. He'll get the ship righted, but will he get it righted this quick?
I'll tell you what, it's going to be a close game. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that up front. That Florida offense still struggling, and today with the news of Chris Rainey being suspended from the team indefinitely due to some police accusations talking about him stalking someone. If Florida loses him for the game, John Brantley is his first really true road start of the year in Knoxville. That's going to be crazy there. You know, Tennessee not too thrilled with the start of this season, but they're going to come out in full force for this Florida game. I think Derek Dooley's going to be really, really close to getting this team up for this game, but I think in the fourth quarter, Florida's going to pull away. They just have too much experience.
And honestly, in my opinion, I think Florida is a lot like Oregon, who Tennessee played last week. They have lots of speed, lots of guys who can make plays. I think it's going to be a lot closer than Oregon was, but Florida is going to end up winning the game. They're just better, but hopefully Tennessee will end up hanging with them lately. Clemson at Auburn, ESPN Game Day is going to be there for that one. How do you see that one playing out?
I'll tell you what, Game Day is going to be there. It's a big matchup. Kyle Parker leading the Clemson Tigers into Jordan-Hare Stadium. Going to pick the Tigers to win this game.
Oh,
the Auburn Tigers.
He got me there.
I think the Auburn Tigers with Cam Newton is going to be ready for Kyle Parker. The defense played a little bit better last week against Mississippi State. I expect them to pick their game up even more, and Auburn's going to win, I think, by 10 or 14 points.
I agree. As much as I would like to pick the Clemson Tigers, and the Auburn Tigers definitely get this one done at home in front of a very rowdy Jordan-Hare crowd. Now our game. Not much really to say, but Bama at Duke. Who wins and why?
I think Alabama's going to win the game. I'm going to take them 35-10 over Duke. I think Alabama's just got too much depth. That's the difference between the SEC and the ACC. And I think that with the emergence of Marcel Darius in that pass rush, it's going to give the secondary more opportunities to make even bigger plays. And I think Alabama's going to win that game quite easily.
Absolutely, I agree. It's at 2:30. It's a day game. You know, Duke. Mostly Alabama fans, I believe, will be at this game. I think most of the Bama fans are going to make their trip across to the eastern seaboard there. But Bama wins in a pretty big blowout. I say 42-7. We'll see, but you know,